I would like to announce that a quorum is present, the meeting is duly called, and a notice of the meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act. The time is 6 p.m. The following board members are in attendance: Dr. Buddy Bonner, Allison Lasan, Catherine Sells, Sheila Taylor, Michelle Akateb, Dr. Stacy Barker, and Jenny Prosnick. If you are so led, would you please join me in prayer? Dear Heavenly Father, we ask you to guide and bless those assembled here to make good decisions for the future of those we serve. Let the words from our mouths and the thoughts in our minds be pleasing to you. Please grant us the spirit of wisdom and discernment. Help us engage in meaningful discussion and grow closer as a group. Grant us the patience to work together. Let us work together with understanding and compassion in our hearts. That we ask that you bless all schools, and especially the schools within Lewisville ISD, that they may be safe places for sound learning, new discovery, and the pursuit of excellence, and grant those who teach and those who learn your protection. Ask this in your Son's name. Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and the Texas Pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Public comments are next on the agenda, and tonight we have no speakers. So moving on to discussion items. First up is Superintendent and District Goals for 2024-2025. Dr. Rapp.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I'm going to go ahead and ask the team that's here tonight to come on up, because the very first thing we're going to do in this presentation is take a deep dive into CCMR. Then we will move into our scorecard discussion and talk about lessons that we've learned from year one implementation of our long-range plan and scorecard, proposed changes and revisions to consider as we've reflected on year one with our scorecard, a draft of the DIP strategies that we're working on to support scorecard targets, and then ultimately the section of my evaluation for 2025 that the superintendent goals would come from the scorecard, and then a timeline. So one of the things we know that we've talked about as we've done our student learning updates throughout the year is we've been looking and discussing and answering questions about CCMR and where we fall compared to the state and to other districts. And of course, we've got our TAPER report that tells us, and then we've also got our local data that we monitor for CCMR. So the team that we have here tonight, I appreciate Karen and Jason and Jill and Ms. Litchfield and Dr. Fitzhugh. They all have a portion of this conversation as we take a deep dive. After the CCMR portion, we're going to stop there and have a discussion and answer any questions related to that, and then move on into the scorecard. And so with that, I'll turn it over first to talk about some assessment implications with CCMR, and then we'll go into CTE, staffing, and graduates.
Okay, so one of the biggest pieces with the way the state measures CCMR is that students can meet the criteria through a college readiness exam, TSI, SAT, ACT. Currently, the state pays for all of our students to take one of those exams, and then the student must pay for the rest of the costs. So when we've been meeting with our principals and different things talking about CCMR, one of the things that has kind of risen in the conversation is, do we want to pay for students to have a second assessment? One of the things that really kind of has swirled up with it is the TSI, you can take a reading separate and a math separate. Like, you don't have to take it all at one time. And so we've heard from some other districts that they have all students take the TSI on STAR days when they're not taking STAR tests. With our principals, one of the conversations that's kind of come up is the TSI can also, students need to perform at a certain level in order to be able to qualify for dual credit courses. And so some of the campuses are talking about, do we have students take that TSI English reading portion a little bit earlier so we can see who qualifies for a dual credit course, and then the district would cover that cost. So we estimate that that would cost about $42,000 for the district. TSI cost around $8 per subject area, give or take a little. They've got some different scoring based on how far the student goes in some subtests, but that's about the average per subject per test. And so that's one of the suggestions that the group kind of talked about was, do we offer a second one?
So as we begin talking about how to meet CCMR through CTE, one of the things that you'll know that we'll talk about is how to complete a program of study. A lot of times you'll hear pathway instead of program of study. So here's an example up here about a student who didn't start anything in middle school directly into one of our main campus high schools, doesn't have the Career Center on their schedule. So this is the entrepreneurship pathway. So it shows the 4 levels of courses, each for 1 credit. So you could take these each 1 year apiece, freshman through senior year, as well as the certification listed. So a student that went through this whole program of study right here would end up being a completer. So as far as CTE suggestions, one of the ways to meet the criteria was by earning an IBC, but beginning with 2024 students. So this year's graduates, you must complete an industry-based certification and course requirements. This year, it does need to be a concentrator, which is 2 or more courses for 2 or more credits. Next year's graduating class of 2025, it'll need to be a completer, so that's that full pathway, the 3 or more courses for 4 or more credits. One of the things that we could consider is require students to select and complete a pathway. As far as the impact that would have on campuses, require staff, potential staff change in certifications, because some courses are going to be heavier in CT staff and then potentially less in some other areas. We may be able to utilize District of Innovation for certification needs. If we need to pull a teacher into the business cluster or the food cluster or the culinary and hospitality cluster, we may be able to match that based on their experience through District of Innovation. And then obviously there's going to be trade-off and limitations. It would limit student career exploration. Students would have to finish that pathway, whatever one that they start. It would limit your elective options because you do need to make sure that you're holding those 4 spots for your program of study. And then it would remove that flexibility. So some of the things that people want to kind of take a little bit of an experience, I want to test these 3 different career areas, they would really need to kind of hone in and start one. If they decide they don't like it, they would have to pivot and start fresh in another one. So those are some of the trade-offs we would see selecting those pathways. Another option is require campuses to offer only specific CTE pathways that end in an industry-based certification. So this would be the expected impact to campus would be similar as what we talked about in the last one. But also campuses must schedule students in a pathway that would be narrow and allowable pathways. So if only 5 students signed up for a certain business course, you may say, hey, we need to pull those 5 students out and now put them in the entrepreneurship pathway because 5 students as a whole cohort can't go through and fill classes. So those are things that we would have to look at. And the trade-off and limitations, different paths at different campuses. So that's one thing that you could look at is do certain campuses specialize in certain programs of study, or do you increase staffing at all campuses to offer all options at all of the campuses? Another thing is removal of programs that do not have an industry-based certification or that certification is extremely challenging at that home campus. Fashion design, interior design, esports, those are current programs that we have that really are more student experience. Some of these programs, they may have a certification option, but the way that they're structured at the main campuses, they really aren't feasible with how they're taken. Narrowed down offerings to maximize class size. So when you look at the scorecard and the course offerings, it would have to slim up what we offer to make sure that we maximize those class sizes. Course selection would be more strategic versus only interest-based. There were some mentalities in some districts that said throw everything out there and see what sticks. And if enough kids sign up for it, excuse me, that's what we'll offer. And that makes it a lot more challenging now with CCMR. Students no longer can select any course because we have to make sure that we're strategic regarding our certifications for teachers, what's going to meet CCMR. This would be adult driven because obviously students aren't going to understand the whole component of CCMR. That's our job as instructional leaders, and we just have to make sure that we're meeting the students' interest and how to get them to accomplish that. And this would also take hold of teachers teaching in areas that are assigned and teachers teaching in areas that that the courses fill versus saying, well, I've taught this for 10, 15 years. I'm really good and passionate about it. And so it may be more where they're assigned than where they necessarily prefer. And then the last one is evaluate our middle school programs, which I know we've done a lot of looking at the past few years, but streamline current CTE offerings to reflect more in-demand programs of study at the middle schools. For example, business marketing and finance is one of our most popular programs of studies at the high school campuses. Well, if that's the case, then ideally you would look at starting those programs of study in the middle schools. But you would have to remove some courses that have lesser program of study completion opportunities. An example would be the tech apps minded, the robotics courses. So it would cause course changes, possible staff certification needs because we're very tech apps heavy at those middle schools. And the trade-offs, limitations, the reason we have strong tech apps and robotics at the non-STEM middle schools is to make sure that we get enough of that STEM offering at the non-STEM middle schools. So that is something that would be limited if we decided to go that route. And then dual credit offerings.
That's me. Okay, so Sarah talked about using assessment to meet CCMR, and then Jason dove into CTE pathways to meet CCMR. I'm going to kind of take a quick dive into dual credit. Students can earn CCMR through a dual credit course, 3 hours of a math or an English course, or 9 hours of anything other than math or English. And currently we have two different types of teachers that are currently teaching those courses right now. We have our embedded teachers. To be an embedded dual credit teacher requires 18 content graduate hours in that particular content area to be able to teach that course. And then in other dual credit courses, we have our adjunct professors that we partner with NCTC and Collin that come to the campus to teach those courses. So, campuses have difficulties increasing these dual credit offerings. Those two community colleges do not have the same schedule we do. They don't have the same start date. They don't have the same end date. Their class periods are not the same length, which in terms of a adjunct professor time, adjunct professors do not work on Fridays. So we've got to find coverage for, because our students still come to class. So some of the things we might consider doing, we can hire teachers that are certified to teach those dual credit courses and really try to prioritize finding those teachers that are out there that have the 18 graduate hours in that content area. A trade-off, a limitation, it might be difficult to find the number we need. We can increase the subs and the staff provided when those adjunct dual credit professors are not on campus. We've got to find coverage for our kids when those adjuncts aren't there, like the beginning of the year and on Fridays. That might increase expenditures for additional staff to watch our students. And then anytime we're talking about dual credit, there's a cost to our students. Running between $155 and $165, for the actual course, plus the cost of instructional materials running about $80. Okay. So, in considering everything, some suggestions, considerations, just with CCMR in general. We could consider students would not be allowed to be an early graduate, be a student aide, or enroll in our senior in and out where students miss first period or fourth period if they're seniors. We had 536 early grads in 2024 and 4,628 senior in and out courses for spring and fall. Now, in some cases, that was the same student that was enrolled in that course in both fall and the spring. They had senior out both semesters. We could provide more sections of our college prep math and college prep English courses. TEA is adapting new criteria in order to be a partner with the school district. Those new guidelines are scheduled to come out in the fall. We're hoping that our partners, we reached out to Colin again today to make sure they were going to, engage in that process. They said they're waiting for what the criteria is. So we're hopeful that we will, be able to continue to offer those courses with this new criteria from TEA. Potential, limitations or trade-offs if we, really started enrolling kids in the college prep math and college prep English. English 4 is in some cases a required course in terms of endorsements, and college prep English does not count, even though they both count as an advanced English. One does not count for that particular endorsement. Students might consider taking both English 4 and college prep English, which would increase our staffing needs because usually students would only take one advanced English course. If students enrolled in more of that college prep English, it might result in a decrease of the students graduating with an endorsement because English 4 is the required for an endorsement. We could make CCMR a local graduation requirement. This, might possibly decrease our graduation rate if that was a requirement. Something that we've heard different districts do, and we even heard it from some of our counselors, provide cords for CCMR graduates that would let the world know that they had met criteria at their graduation. I think I'm throwing it to Jill now.
So if you look at our CCMR overall findings, much like Karen said, sometimes CCMR is used in accountability and endorsements are not. So I know we've had discussions with Dr. Fitzhugh when looking at the taper. Our endorsement with distinguished level of achievement and foundation with endorsement is pretty high, but the criteria sometimes are a little bit conflicting, which I'll explain with our example. So the math models course satisfies a math credit for an endorsement, but it does not require the completion of Algebra 2, but Algebra 2 is the preferred prerequisite for college prep math. And then also we have, if you overlay then NCAA on top of that, NCAA does not recognize either of the college prep math or English courses for their core course eligibility. And so that sometimes when we have, and that's not just D1, that's D1, 2, and 3, and that impacts some of our NCAA eligibility pieces. When it comes to the IBCs, the industry-based certifications, the initial CCMR language only included IBCs and did not require that course completion. And now that it's requiring the program of study and an IBC, IBCs were a pretty big focal point for our Career Center programs, but not at the main campuses. So students may have taken the courses at the campuses, but we didn't necessarily have the IBC completion rates. And so our programs of study, when we initially rolled those out, were based on endorsements and student interest. And now we're having to look and see realignment due to those IBC requirements. And so we put some examples. We have courses on main campus like fashion design, and so they don't have an IBC. It's a popular class, but it did lead to an endorsement, but it is not going to lead to a CCMR accountability. And additionally, we have not offered our Microsoft certifications outside of coursework. And so we were having our students that were taking the classes for that Microsoft cert only within the classes that it was tied to. And so that is a couple of examples of how that shift has impacted us. And this is the discrepancy between endorsements and CCMR. Like Ms. Seeley said, that the multidisciplinary pathway endorsement is our most common endorsement. I'll call it the 4x4, so 4 of each subject area, and it does require English 4 with no exceptions. So students that have not met CCMR either have to take English 4 and college prep English, or in order to be CCMR, they would have to forego their endorsement. And so that's been a big discussion with the counselors on how to advise students for that. And then, again, that goes back to your NCAA as well. And then the last piece we wanted to put as a note on here was one of the CCMR completion pathways is the College Bridge program, and that is a computer program that was rolled out, and it's a paid program, so it would cost about $80,000 a year for us to offer it. And even though it's completely computer based, it does require a teacher, so it's not asynchronous and just student led. And so finally, before questions, we wanted to kind of tell you what our next steps are as far as what changes have happened this year and are happening next year. So college prep math and English are offered holistically in 24-25. I know that we've talked a little bit about our winter update when we actually shifted our entire format this year to go to each high school as a CCMR team and really talk about their specific needs and their data, and really have supported them on their campus planning. And this was one of the big areas that we emphasize in utilizing data to find out which students should be in those classes. Additionally, TEA let us know that unless they take it their senior year, it does not count for CCMR. So we found that out after course selection, so we've already gone back in and removed all of our juniors from those courses to ensure that if they're going to take the course, they're getting CCMR. We implemented personal graduation plans at every Career Center student this year. We will definitely continue that for next year and are going to really make sure that that is intentional and front-facing for families. I think I mentioned when we did our counseling update that we're working with Skyward to put it in family access. Also, when we look at our campus personal graduation plans, which typically is what we would think of as the 4-year plan, we're going to integrate a CCMR piece that happens in 8th grade is when typically the development of the 4-year plan happens, and pretty holistically in the area. And then we're going to add the CCMR component into 9th grade as the 2.0 of the 4-year planning. And so we have a group of counselors that are going to be working on what that looks like this summer. And then just like Mr. Cooper talked about, adding the industry-based certifications at the main high school campuses. So this year we added food science, entrepreneurship, and marketing so that students could not have to go to the Career Center if for preference or schedule didn't allow, and they could still have that. And then aligning and advising campuses on our CTE program offerings with completer opportunities. And we've done that through, we have campus CTE liaisons that are counselors at every high school. We also have had elementary and middle school added this year. So Mr. Cooper's team of admin meets with them quarterly and gets feedback and how we can really make sure that we're having these conversations K-12. We've also, like I talked about, our winter update shift, and I know Dr. Fitzhugh and Ms. Seeley and myself and Mr. Cooper have had quite a few individual campus meetings to look at their data and help them in the planning process with what is the best approach for their campus to make their CCMR gains.
So one of the things, just to recap, of course, we've taken some action on our own to make some changes, but we, of course, are looking forward to some of your feedback about some of the ideas, adding the TSI. We could do that, would cost some budget money, or not allowing any more early grads, chords for graduation. So you've heard a lot of different ideas that would be change in practice, and we just look forward to your questions and feedback. So at that, I'll turn it back over to Ms. Brosnick.
Ms. Taylor, you get to go first.
So you gave us a lot of great information, and thank you so much for such a complete presentation. My first question when you started talking was money, and so you answered that with the TSI. There's a lot of information here, and when I think about how it might affect students, I guess what I would want to do is something that I would want to take an action that would have the least amount of detrimental effect or change out of the ordinary for a student. So I'm leaning, even though it costs money, well, all of it will probably cost money, right? Because even when you talked about additional staff or additional training, there's no numbers there, but there will be some at some point. but I'm almost leaning toward the TSI. It seemed to be the easiest thing to make adjustments to and the quickest without a total disruption of all that we have done. Maybe the second thing that I liked was, or the second thing I thought about was, getting rid of, I don't know if I want to say that, eliminating, is that better? The courses that are not tied to an industry-based certification. But again, we tout ourselves as we provide choices and opportunities and what are your interests. So I'm leaning a little bit less in that area. And then some of the things I thought once those changes came through and you were looking for teachers and staff and schedule, getting rid of programs that we've done for so long around early grads and student aids, I was less comfortable with making those decisions. So that's my piece.
Well, everybody wants to join. Ms. Lasan.
I have lots of things that I've written down, and maybe it's because I have an eighth grader, as several of us at this table do, and my wheels are spinning. But I think I've written them down. So I'm just going to ask a couple that I think are good for the group, and anything else I'll just give y'all later. But and I hope this would, I know what endorsements are. I know, that you take different courses to get different endorsements, but why, what's the point? I mean, because, I don't have a college kid yet, so Jill, you want to tell what that's one thing. I'm not done yet, but
Okay,
yes.
I'll be succinct.
Okay.
I think endorsements were TEA's first step towards creating pathways for students that aligned with college and career opportunities. So when they were rolled out in, I think, 2013, it was really, they pulled out the stringent, you have to take this science in 10th grade and this science in 11th grade, so that students had more options and pathways. And so I think it's the initial programs of study, but it also allowed for academic pathways, CTE pathways, so both the college career and the military pathways. And so you have endorsements, which, if I'm being honest, in talking to college admissions, they want distinguished level, which means algebra 2 and a fourth science. So distinguished level is more important than which endorsement that you get, but the endorsement pathways are how you get to that distinguished level.
I guess that's kind of my point. It's like, well, what's the point? Why are we doing this? Okay. And so one other question, Ms. Seeley. So do we have, right now, any kid that's taking dual credit, do we have subs on Fridays? Is that what the deal is now?
I can answer that.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Our campuses, yeah, we split our slides.
Okay.
Our campuses that have higher adjuncts have to either utilize their permanent subs because of minutes, funding, and attendance, or they are sometimes utilizing teachers to cover paid on conference periods to ensure that we take attendance every day.
Okay, but Friday is typically that's the deal. I didn't know that. Okay, because we're definitely looking at that in the future, but I didn't know that. And I guess another thought that I had about dual credit is, I know that Dr. Rogers, kind of one of the last things that he did was get a deal with, it was NCTC, I think, right? And it lowered the cost that we were paying as opposed to with Collin College, right? Y'all correct me if I'm wrong, but, oh, you've got a face.
Yes, they worked to try to bring down some tuition, ultimately in providing money to the district to pay the stipend for the teachers, and then we could use some of that money to help offset book cost, material cost, and tuition.
Okay.
Things are a little bit different now for the community colleges out of the last legislative session, which is a different conversation because NCTC joined the program where they get tuition reimbursement for their free and reduced students. And as a result of that, students can't incur any cost when it comes to materials and things like that. So we are kind of working through some things with NCTC. Collin did not join that program. So That's what's lovely about having two different universities to work with. They're in different boats there, but it's changing a little bit what the arrangement was right before Dr. Rogers left.
Okay, so with everything, it's all complicated. But I guess my original thought was, to me, I don't think it's a total bad thing for us to worry about increasing the costs a little bit, because in some cases they were paying a good bit more for dual credit than they currently are, than kids are. But and then the last thing, I also like the idea of adding the TSI. That's great, I think. I gotta say, I don't really like the idea of, now my other kid was a 2-semester senior out or in, whichever one it was, kid. But I don't think that we should take that away, the early graduation, because I also know another gal that graduated early, and she just really needed to do that. So I'm not a big fan of that option of things, but I'll leave it there.
Dr. Barker, before you jump.
I'm not going to jump across the table at you, Madam President. But CCMR is near and dear to my heart. It's one of those things that I feel really deeply about, and I'm really encouraged by all of the work that you have done and continue to do. I love the conversations that you're having with campuses about their data. I love the personal graduation plans at the Career Center and including CCMR in that. I think at the end of the day, it all comes down to conversations with kids, right? Like, what do you want to do after you leave us? And that drives the conversation. Now, there do have to be, unfortunately, some guidance to those conversations. And I liked that last slide, aligning the advising on campuses, because for a very brief part of time when I was an administrator, one of my roles was to advise 8th graders on their endorsement plans. By the way, I co-authored a paper on the impact of endorsements, which, not great. Anyway, so there's that. But in that very brief role, I realized how impressionable students are when they're making these course choices, right? And so a lot of when we talk about interest, are we giving them the right information to gauge that interest and to channel and funnel that interest into what's going to benefit them? So one of my questions around that is, do we have any data on some of those courses that are not tied to an IBC or to a completer pathway post-high school? My meaning is for floral design, right? It doesn't lead to an IBC. Do we have a lot of students that are leaving the floral design program and getting jobs in floral design? I don't know. That's just a question for you to think about, because if they are, then maybe, CCMR be gone.
Be darned.
Well, I didn't want to say the other word. Because if it's working for the students, we're going to do what's best for the students. But if it's not working for the students, then we need to really think about it. So that's one thing. The other thought that I had around this idea of career pathways, and this actually came from a conversation with someone on Saturday who was telling me about another district that did something similar. And it was Northwest ISD, but don't quote me on the program because it was at a gala, right? So I may not have all the correct information. But one of the things that this person I was talking to was explaining is that they do some alignment of pathways together in order to have some of that choice, right? We're going to try out these two simultaneously, and to align some content that might actually go together and benefit the student in the long term. Here's an example for you. So something like floral design with entrepreneurship. So if I learn or fashion design, if I learn these fashion design skills and entrepreneurship at the same time, then I have some skills to go maybe open my own shop or sell the clothes that I'm designing on Etsy. So that it's just a thought of thinking about, are there some creative things that we can do to both align the interest with some things that are going to head in the direction of an IBC? All right, I ended up going in the opposite order, so I'll end on my favorite, which I was going to start with. TSI testing. I am all about testing everyone that isn't already signed up for an SAT or an ACT on TSI. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, as you mentioned, right, we want to use data to be able to make choices. So a lot of districts are using TSI almost like a screener to be able to say, okay, this student isn't taking SAT, they aren't taking ACT, they are maybe not in a dual credit class, but they could be because they scored really well on TSI. So are we having conversations with that kid about getting into a dual credit class? Or the opposite is true. They didn't do so well on TSI. So what do we need to guide them to be more successful in? Maybe it's college prep, because they want to go to college, so we're going to foster that in the way that we can. Maybe it's some support, so they take the TSI again on their own. Or maybe it's an alternate pathway that doesn't include TSI. The other thing about TSI, correct me if I'm wrong, because it's been a minute since I've been in the manuals, but if our students are successful on those TSI, SAT, and ACT, that's also part of the criteria for outcomes bonuses for CCMR.
If they, for the college ready, they have to perform a certain way and enroll in a college, in a university, post-grad, something.
Correct, so half of the criteria. But it's the same for career. They have to get the IBC and have TSI.
Correct.
Correct?
Yes.
So in order for them to get the outcomes bonus, unless it's military, they got to have TSI or SAT or ACT. So that could, in effect, if we can get them the other half of that criteria, offset some of the cost of the test. Now, I know there's requirements about how we can use it, but that is a funding source. So that's the other reason why I'm a big fan of TSI. Thank you for all that you're doing to improve CCMR. I am done. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Alcateb.
I don't know how to follow that up, man. First of all, thank you so much for everything, for putting this together. I know CCMR is very complex, very confusing, and it's hard for us to understand, mind knowing, telling our students and our counselors and our teachers the whole process. Quick question, I might know this, but because we can use the SAT, ACT, TSI as an indicator, what is the score in order for it to count for CCMR? Is there a specific score, or is there a specific?
Each one of them has their own separate score.
That's what I thought.
And the student on those tests, if they're going to meet CCMR through an assessment, they have to meet a reading score and a math score.
Okay.
Now, the nice part about it is you can meet the math on the ACT and the reading on the SAT, they'll let you combine if you've taken multiple, but you have to meet both.
Okay, perfect. And what is the percentage? Because I know one of the slides you said as a suggestion is offering a second test to our students, whether it's another ACT, SAT, or the TSI. Roughly, about what is the percentage of students who need that because they're not scoring what they need for the CCMR? Is it more than 50%? Is it 75%? And you don't have to get it to me today. You can think about it.
I don't have an exact number, but what I would say is the way most of our campuses want to use TSI is they want to use it before the SAT or the ACT opportunity become available.
Okay.
So I think kind of to what Dr. Barker said, it would be more of a screener. So students who are close, we would do some different interventions. Maybe so when they took the SAT, ACT, it would improve it, or it helps us identify you're doing really good in English, so we're going to get you into dual credit. So there's just some different options there that it allows you if you use it a little bit sooner.
Yeah, because like Dr. Barker, I even wrote down that I do like the TSI as being an indicator for those students to kind of see where they would fall and where they are. I mean, having a high schooler and stuff, it would have been great for him to have taken that test early on for us to be able to kind of gauge where he was and what support he needed in order to achieve certain scores instead of us just taking the SAT, ACT a million times. It would have been very helpful for us. So I wrote that down. I also wrote down about the dual pathways, having that question, is it possible for us to look at the kids being creative with their pathways? Like maybe, she mentioned floral design. I was thinking more on the STEM type things with the math and the science, or the math and the business perspective, or the finance and the business entrepreneurship, and allowing them the opportunity to kind of gauge it, but at the same time being able to come up once they get a little bit more into it, okay, this is the path I'm choosing, just to give them options. So I also had noted that as well. And, like Ms. Lasan said, we have a bunch of 8th grade kiddos sitting up here under our belts. And that was one of my things I know that we had talked about. Right now, our 8th graders and the counselors are going to have the conversations over the summer. Is that going to put our incoming 9th graders behind? Or have they already started having these conversations with our 9th graders as our incoming 9th as they're preparing their schedules and their plan for next year?
So they typically do scheduling in the January, February timeframe, and then they will do the 4-year planning in the month of May.
Okay.
Because we have found that it's very overwhelming. So there is a conversation about the 4-year plan and endorsements during course selection, but we give the big picture and then we say focus on this, and then in our end of April, beginning of May advisory, our future pathways lessons are the 4-year planning.
Okay, perfect. So then they'll start having those conversations and be able to go in with a plan and an idea.
And TEA requires every 8th grader to declare an endorsement prior to leaving 8th grade.
Yes, which most of them go on the other endorsement. Okay, I think that's it for now. Thank you so much for everything you guys are doing. Really, 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 thank you.
Dr. Bonner.
So you guys are going to hit for the cycle tonight. Everybody's going to have questions. And they're all going to be different. You might be surprised. I want to talk about money for a little bit. Everything we're going to need to talk about probably through the next legislative cycle is going to have a financial component to it, in my mind at least. And so first thing, CT is still a revenue generator, right? Indexed. So the more kiddos we can get in a CTE course, the more revenue the state's going to give us, correct? So if there's no other reason to take CTE, that's it, right? So the other thing I want to ask you about, I've got them numbered down here. I'm trying to keep in order like Dr. Barker was. I appreciate the variety of options that you're having to deal with, but also they're all contradictory, right? You've got 2 community college partners, you've got the military, you've got TEA. Got to help you in trying to figure it out and keep it straight, because I know on the receiving end of things, that's got to be incredibly difficult to keep a unified program approach. So thank you for your work in doing that, because in these partnerships, they don't all evenly align, correct? Is that, yeah, okay. I do want to talk about I'm just going to call it program of study, I guess, and just, caution is not the right word, but I'm hopeful and I feel confident that we're being very cautious on specialization. And what I mean by that is every time you cut up the curricular pie, you're adding staff. Every time. And so, Jason, you said it a moment ago, I almost jumped out of my chair. 5 kids does not make a cohort. And if that's all we've got, we need to get rid of that program. And I hate to say that because there's probably a 2nd grader out there that's really interested in that. But, ladies and gentlemen, we've got to decide what we're going to be when we grow up from an instructional and a curricular standpoint. And we cannot be everything to everybody. And so I trust you all and Dr. Rapp to make program decisions and evaluation on that based on what the kids need. Not only what they need, but what they're interested in. And so I think we do a good job of that, but I would really appreciate just keeping it at the forefront, because from a program evaluation standpoint, it's going to be critical, but it's also going to be critical from a funding standpoint and keeping this thing running. I want to talk about our community college partners for just a quick moment. Another unique variable, we're so large and elongated that we participate in 2 of them. Different organizations, different approaches to things. I wonder the additional cost of Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Tuesday, what are we going to do on Friday? That additional cost. I wonder if we reapportion those monies to just doing embedded staff. There's also some other personnel reasons to do that. I won't get into all that, but just strictly focus on embedded staff, incentivizing our staff to go out and be that person, and then working to retain them, because then we're in control, frankly. And then lastly, I had a number 5. I like the last slide. That was number 5. So thank you for including that. There was probably something on there that was really interesting to me, but it's been too long since I wrote number 5. I like the last slide. So thank y'all very much.
Ms. Sells?
Yes, I just want to say thank you for the work that y'all have put into this. I find it ironic that back in 2013 we got the endorsement direction, and now we get the CCMR, and guess what? They don't align. Go figure. And to Mrs. Lasson's point, I don't know a lot about what my kids have done since they graduated and moved out of my house, but I can guarantee you one thing. Nobody's ever asked them about an endorsement or the STAR test. Those two things. And I will say that there was probably a pathway within that aligned them to where they are going today. But I will tell you, those of us that are Texas high school graduates prior to all this, we ain't doing so bad. And so I wish that TEA would understand when they bring new things on, the implications of them not aligning. Because just as we are asking you all to right size and to right align, I think that that's something that they need to look at in their organization. And that's just very blunt, but it's how I feel. I believe that CCMR is a pathway for a lot of kids that didn't have a pathway. But when you're giving us the directions and you're making us follow the rules, make them rules that make sense. And I don't see some of that in what I see from what our requirements and what your requirements are. And I apologize for that because I wish I could change it. But I want to say I appreciate what you do. I appreciate how you try to meet the needs of the most kids that you can. I do have a couple of questions as far as when you're talking about maybe not making early grads and senior in-outs part of that. How many kids would that have affected? If we could have those actual numbers, might help us do a little bit of thought and contemplation on that. And the same as far as when you're talking about making that a local graduation requirement, I would really love to know who that would affect and what population. And if I'm not sure that I'm really on board with making that a requirement at this time without knowing, or even having the discussion farther without knowing who those populations are. And so once again, and I agree, I wish that we could employ our own dual instructors. What a benefit to us that would be. And the students, you're speaking, that's 20% of the classroom time that they're not getting the person that should be teaching them or they should be hearing from. And I know that our hands are tied, but I really wish it was different. And I wish that we could, like Dr. Bonner said, incentivize our own employees to become those people. And so I really would like that. And once again, thank you so much just for all the thought in right sizing and right aligning and all of that for our kiddos. We've got some tough choices to make. And even though we can't be all things to all people or all students, boy, I think everyone up here, their heart wishes we could. So, thank you.
Just a quick head nod. Dr. Bonner, how did you feel about the TSI portion? You're all for that? Are you yay or nay? Nah. Okay. No, you're fine. I'm just keeping a little tally over here. That's all. So I'm really excited to start interviewing preschoolers so we can get them on the pathway. I'm excited to have a superhero pathway for them and a garbage truck man pathway for them and a TikTok pathway for them because the influencer pathway, that's right, not TikTok, influencer. Because that is, I wholeheartedly feel that's where TA is pushing this. I do. And I think it is sad because I think a lot of us who went to college could tell you that I went to college for one thing, I graduated with something, and then I did something else. So, and I don't think that is a unique pathway for a lot of people. Some of my questions were asked by Ms. Sells. I did want to know how many, like especially those 536 early graduates, how many of those didn't have the CMR on their what would that local graduation requirement look like? And to Dr. Bonner's point, and it kind of marries with Dr. Barker's point, so two doctors, so I can't be wrong, that, for example, like our floral design, for example, we get CTE money for those students, right? And so we're still getting support for those students, but so I'm not about like kicking that necessarily to the curb just because it's not necessarily an IBC, but at the same time, Dr. Barker has a point that we're not marrying it with another pathway of some kind. And I think that there's a way to, if you will, go for it, please.
Sorry, just a quick clarification. So floral design is actually a really easy CCMR point based on how it's fashion design, however, both Fs, but one will get us an A and one will not get us an A. So, and we do have a superhero pathway. It's called the education and training pathway, just for clarification.
Well done. Well done. Good job.
We just need more people taking it because that's our lowest enrollment course right now. Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, it's fashion design. Sorry, I'm all about floral design. And then I also appreciate the work. I think a lot of this is getting pushed by TEA. I do have a question, and I don't know if it can be answered, and that's about our emergent bilingual students who probably don't take English 4. Am I right?
They do not actually. They take an advanced English course paired with their ESL classes. So they are taking a multicultural lit, which aligns with the TEKS of the ESOL classes. And so they pair that through their English pathway while they are in high school.
So that does not qualify. I'm asking, so do they have then a qualifier or not?
They might be in a different endorsement pathway. Sometimes they'll be arts and humanities for 5 social studies or one of the fine arts pathways.
Yes, please.
Although LHS has paired college prep math and college prep English, especially for a group of advanced ESL students this year, this school year. This school year. Mm-hmm. So we should see it on next.
And that's going forward, or are we waiting to see how that turned? I'm so confused.
All indications that I have from LHS is that they plan to continue that model, but for more students.
Yeah, so we still have one more report where we won't yet get to that class of kids.
Right, because we're 2 years behind.
Right. So we'll get the class of 23, which are already out the door that didn't get that, and then when it comes time class 24, then we should start to see the impact of that decision.
I do thank you all for the work. It's a web. It's not a domino that falls. It's a web because it's all interdependent, and it's all interdependent on choices and opportunities. And I would be remiss if I said that we would not be having some of this discussion, even though we're talking about CCMR, if it wasn't for some budget constraints brought by no additional funding from the state legislature. So on that happy note, thank you all for being here. We appreciate the work. Did you need anything else from us, Dr. Rapp?
I don't think so. No,
Okay.
I think thank you for the feedback. That's great. We'll continue to work through some of the answers to those questions and keep you all posted for sure. So in your folders, you have a handout printed. I thought it might be easier for talking through these next pieces. It has performance objectives on the front of it with the cornerstone coloring. And if you'll just flip that over to the next page, you'll see the scorecard, the long-range scorecard there in front of you. So some of the lessons that we've learned in year one implementation of this scorecard is that regular review and progress monitoring of the targets have been really invaluable for campuses and departments. So I'm really proud of the work that Dr. Fitzhugh, Dr. Miller have done with the scorecard check-ins. I just think that's amazing work. I think they could teach a lot of other people about that. And then Ms. Litchfield with the school chiefs following up on many of those conversations, aligning the TPES aspect of these conversations. I think it's allowed us to get a lot of traction there and allowed us to have a lot of common language and focus for the whole organization. Several of our year one long-range plan goals required gathering feedback. We had quite a few that this was a baseline year for. So I'm going to talk through those. One of the things we've learned from the internal audits that you all have done is about the audit tracker, where we're tracking the things that the audits have recommended and checking off when do we make progress. So we're taking learning from that system and applying it here where we have recommendations to implement and measure how we're implementing those recommendations. Okay, so with that, we have to take a look at, we have 7 total number of outcomes on your scorecard that had baseline feedback this year and are going to have a measurement based on how many recommendations get implemented. And so I'll highlight some of those here in just a second. And then we have 6 total outcomes on the scorecard that we are proposing to make adjustments and revisions to. So when you look at all the items on the scorecard that we created measurements for a year ago when we brought this to you, 6 for possible revision really isn't too many of those. Okay, so let's start first with 113 and 114. That's your reading and math. We're not changing any of these targets, but I thought it was important for you all to know that as a result of really reflecting and questions about the campus and how are they hitting their targets, we're going to have the campuses ensure that all of their targets are set at a minimum of 60%. Additionally, they're going to have to set targets even if they have a student group of 5. So that's a big change that will allow us to move the needle a little bit more aggressively with campuses when it comes to student groups. And of course, we're reporting that data out to you all as well. So we're not changing any of our targets, but we're changing how we're asking campuses to set their targets, which should impact our targets, if that makes sense. On 1.5, 1.2.3, 1.2.4, 1.2.5, and 1.2.6, those are all related to CCMR, and based on some of our decisions around here about CCMR, we're going to work with campus principals to align practices. That's not changing any of our targets. That's trying to raise our ability to meet both the state and local targets. Okay? All right, so with that, let's go on over to student experience and take a look at 255. Originally, last year, we had a 255 that said we were going to track workload and time commitments for APs and counselors. What we're proposing to you that you'll see on this scorecard is a new 255 and a 256 where the counselors and APs have been separated out into their own. If you'll remember when Jill and Manya were in front of you last month for their presentation, they reported on the fact that we're required to ensure our counselors spend less than 20% on non-counselor duties. So we thought that was the best way to actually report out and track. So then our implement adjustments to the AP role based on study recommendations would be next year. We would look to implement 2 recommendations on how to impact AP workload and ensuring time with kids, and the following year another 2 recommendations. That would be 4 recommendations implemented total to impact AP workload. And Ms. Litchfield's working on those recommendations. So that's one of our changes there. In resource stewardship, if you'll go over to 413, page 3, we've been talking about this one throughout the year with Ms. Cobb coming over into HR. are increasing recruitment opportunities with a focus on diversity. One of the things that I've done is impact the staffing in HR, and I've written to you all about this, that we did not refill every open HR position that we've had, so we're having to rethink that goal. So we have changed those targets for the next couple of years. We've lowered them a little bit because of the staffing implications there. And we can answer any questions on that in a few minutes. 414, increasing participants in leadership programs. One of the things that you asked me about at my formative was, who are all these people that can participate in leadership programs? And so Dr. Miller's taken that back and worked with Kelly Roden on looking more at what are all the programs we're offering that should feed leadership participants in. We're offering a lot more than what we were originally counting when we developed this. So we've upped the number for that target, given that we have way more opportunities for people to participate in. So that would be a change in those targets there as well. And we can definitely list out, we've got there on the screen, brand ambassadors, mentors, things like that, that would count in that total. And then 423 on that same page, we've talked a lot about retention rate of hard to fill areas. And when Sheila first created this before she left, she was counting it in a different way, and Melissa's really proposing a change to how we're counting this, so we would change that to a percentage of looking at how are our fill rates in special ed, bilingual, and Spanish. So you see that change to 96% is our retention rate goal in those areas, and then that moves to 98%. 432, that is streamlining and consolidating. Dr. Miller and Kelly Roden have talked a lot about this, and we believe that after much collaboration, this really should be a strategy as a part of the district improvement plan, and when we are streamlining appropriately, it will move the needle on 431 right above it, which is, do staff give us high marks on the quality and impact of the professional learning? And 433, do they believe they're receiving effective training? And so we think 432 is really more of a strategy at the end of the day than it is something to measure specifically. And then 513, increase recognize someone submissions. We definitely, in looking at this year, we set those targets way too low. So we're coming back around and saying for 24-25 we want to hit 6,500, and then 25-26 hit 6,500. So we're significantly upping those to include internal and external submissions of Recognize Someone. I told the leadership team today that one of my favorite magazines to read is the Secondary Principal magazine, and in both the March and April editions were articles about teacher retention, and in both of them it talked about building systems around recognition and valuing teachers. So I want Shauna to talk about how this feeds into the DIP, and then we'll pause there and take any questions on scorecard before I talk about the superintendent goal element of the scorecard. Okay? All right, Shauna, talk DIP.
All right. You should have a copy of a draft of strategies. These are DIP strategies. So this is a draft. We're still working on these. But actually, when we implemented year one of long-range plan, we brainstormed, at the time, we brainstormed what would year one, year two, year three look like. A lot of those so that we could build on that over time, the foundation, and then extending on. A lot of those strategies we're in alignment with, and we've put them in here. There are others that the journey might be a little different, or we learned something from year one. We either made more progress or less progress that we need to change the strategy. So leadership team has been collaborating on that now. We've sent it back out to departments, and they're now working on it and fine-tuning it. Dr. Rapp and I come back for our end-of-the-year check-ins with departments, and we will look over that again based on the approval of the scorecard to make sure that it's aligning to the targets we set. And then at Inspire, I was about to say Thrive. I was like, no, it's Inspire. At Inspire, we will finalize these, and then we bring them to you in August. So you'll see lots of themes of the results of the feedback. There's several strategies in there based on that. There's others that we found we need to ask more in-depth questions to understand the barriers in order to then create a system to overcome those barriers for them. So there's some of that in there. And then a lot of streamlining. We really have talked about the in-person, the end product. So if that's the teacher or the administrator or the student, and how does all of this feel to them, and making sure that we're all working in a system together. So a draft to come back in August.
So I'll turn it over real quickly then back to any questions about the idea of those revisions and those scorecard targets before we talk about how that feeds into the superintendent evaluation.
Dr. Barker.
Thank you, Madam President. So I have to say this, and I'll probably say it every time we talk about scorecard, as a data file, very much so. I'm so proud to be a part of a district that utilizes formative data and not just instructional benchmark data to inform decisions at the level that LISD does. This is not common practice, and it is difficult, and it is complicated, but so valuable. And you mentioned that on the first slide, right? How valuable you've seen the process. And one of the signs of maturity in using data in this way is recognizing when something doesn't need to be measured at this level and when adjustments need to be made, and that's what you're doing. And it's just, I mean, my little data heart over here is just a flutter. So I start with that. The other thing that I wanted to say is that I appreciate the lowering of the campus size to 5, especially as well, a lot of times what ends up happening, especially with campuses that have smaller sizes of a particular group, is they, as you mentioned, they lose the focus, right? They don't focus on those particular students necessarily for whatever reason. And then it gets aggregated out at the district level, and all of a sudden you see an issue where the campus didn't see an issue. And so I really appreciate that tweak. That's really important. And then setting a minimum target, right? We know that not every campus can have that same target, but making sure that we have a floor, I think is really, really important. So kudos for making those adjustments. The one that I know that it's been a push and pull over the last few years, this 4.1.3, we changed it from an outcome goal to an input goal. As we were looking at outcomes initially in the first iteration of the scorecard of, percentage of staff representation, we changed it to an input goal around what we're doing to increase that, and now we're adjusting it again. So I know it's complicated, and I know the reasons why, but I'm just still a little bit concerned of how will we continue to focus on hiring staff representative of our student body. So I'm going to keep asking that question. It doesn't mean I'm going to say we can't have this adjustment, but it's something that I think we need to keep in mind. Thank you.
Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you for putting this together, and I agree definitely with a lot of the changes that were proposed. With the 1.1.3 and 1.1.4, I guess I had some questions on clarification on that. With the campus targets being set at a minimum of 60%, were they all different before based on the different campuses? Okay, so now it will be every campus will have that minimum. Okay, so that's what I was not clear on. And then 2.5.5, I think that makes sense based on the discussion with the counseling team. There was another note here regarding, is it an additional, I guess, point under student experience as it relates to the discipline committee? Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, so we had several where these were baseline, and so that was one where it'll be measured in the number of recommendations that we implement.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I didn't go through every single one of those examples. We had 7 of those total where we had to go back through this baseline year and say, we're going to implement recommendations, and that's that's what those notes are about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And
You're
then the
welcome.
other question I had regarding increased retention rate of hard-to-fill areas, I guess, and this is just a question, are Title I teachers, is that a hard-to-fill position or no?
Definitely Title I campuses were overall one of the reasons that we did the Title I stipend was to
Right,
address
correct. I
retention
remember
of
that.
staff.
That's right.
It was, yes.
I was wondering if that was something that should be listed
Okay.
with the
okay.
other ones.
We can definitely take a look at that.
I would take a look at that. And then my other question was related to, sorry, I'm trying to look through different pieces of paper. The increased recognized someone submissions. Remind me how many we had for the year? Because it's a high percentage increase for the goal.
Yeah, we had 3,000 at the end of last year, and where are we sitting now, over 5?
Gotcha. So we feel like 6,500 is reasonable.
I don't have the exact number. I can pull it up here in just a second, but that's within reach. We felt that was very attainable.
Okay. And then my last comment, I agree with Dr. Barker regarding hiring and recruitment of diverse educators. Again, wanting to see a better match between the students that we serve and the educators. That's all I had. Thank you.
Dr. Bonner?
So I appreciate that there are, I think, if I counted correctly, 62 items on this, and we're looking at renewing 6 of them. That's not unreasonable, and they all make sense. I'm going to focus my attention on 4.1.3, increased recruitment opportunities with focus on diversity. Just with a question, Lori or Melissa, is that 20 and 25, is that site visits? Is that what the reduction is, 37, 39 to 20? So, I'm sorry to make you come up here, Melissa.
It is site visits, but it's also kind of a change in our strategy. Instead of traditional job fairs, things like that, it's us going out. So site visits in a way to different groups, such as a BASO group or an HBCU, the different groups within the university to kind of lay some seeds there first, just kind of looking at it a little differently than the traditional job fair. Yeah, I thought as much, and also know that because it's a very competitive market, you're going to target those high yield areas, right? We are going to cut from 39 to 20, but those 19 are going to be the lower. I don't mean to malign them, lower tier where we're not reaping as much. Yeah. The only thing I would say, and I appreciate Dr. Barker and my colleague Ms. Taylor's comments on it as well, from an input approach to an output, or from an output approach to an input approach. Everybody out there, we all know what the output is. Right? How many people do we get in here that show diversity? And that's on the TAPR report, and it's been tracking upward and to the right for a long time, and we just need to continue that march. So thank you very much.
Ms. Alcatep, did you have anything? Okay. All right. So I have a couple questions. I'd like to understand on 1.13 and 1.14 how 60% is the floor, why it's not higher.
Right now, we have some of our campuses that have set their goals much lower, so that's our first step there. Some of our campuses that struggle a little bit more, that 60%, and some of our student groups will be a reach for them. And so that's why we set it that way right now. We'll continue to work through that as we look at the different data pieces.
So then is the plan to raise that floor limit?
I think
over
as it's
time?
appropriate, we would.
Okay. As long as we're going to be raising it from where that is. And then I agree with my colleagues on the diversity hire. On the recognized someone submissions, I love the total, but I do think it would be interesting to see what the breakdown is between internal and external on that. Internal shows a culture. External shows how that culture is reaching out into our community. And I think that would be, I'd like them all grouped together. I think grouped together is the goal is fine. I'm just a little more curious how that is laying out as far as percentages. And that is all I have on that, and I thank you for the work.
Okay, well, thank you all so much for all of this input. And again, the other ones that I didn't speak to but were changes that were noted on the document are those ones that will require recommendation tracking. So I thought, again, thank you for the opportunity to learn from the way the internal audits are structured and us carrying over that system. Okay, so now how this all feeds into the superintendent goals. So everything that's highlighted in yellow on that scorecard document we were just looking at, those are what feed into section 1 of my superintendent goals currently. That's 15 items. I'm not recommending any changes to that section 1, those section 1 items. Some of these are a reach as we prepare for my summative coming up. There are definitely a few of those that we are within range but not reaching, so there are stretch goals in there for sure. But as you've seen, the way that we've structured my evaluation and I've responded in the formative, truly I'm reporting out on the entire scorecard between sections 1 and 2. And so, I think it's been nice to have something like the scorecard to be a glue that allows for evidence on the entire superintendent evaluation instrument. And then a few of the items that I have to speak to that don't have a specific scorecard element, y'all have seen me provide evidence in other ways. So I would be open to, of course, any questions or any discussion, Ms. Prosnick, as well, about adding any elements to Section 1 if anyone feels that's necessary. I'm not proposing any changes to that. And then the timeline, ultimately, in April, if we don't make any changes to what's in Section 1, I'll bring that forward in June for adopting as a part of what will feed into my 24-25 evaluation, and adopting these changes to the long-range plan at the June board meeting as well to the scorecard. And we'll finalize DIP strategies at Inspire. Campuses will identify their priorities. We'll bring the DIP for discussion in August, and then approval in September. So that's kind of the timeline we're on there.
Board, is there anything at this time? All right. Ta-da.
Oh.
Now moving on. Next on the agenda is the Board Advocacy Committee report. Good gracious, say that fast 3 times. I had the pleasure of serving with Ms. Alcatab and Ms. Sells. It is in your folders. This is the draft plan. You will notice much of this work was work that we did with our team of 8 that we did way back in October. Wow, that was a long time ago. Could have even been September. You'll see the main issue that we went through. We followed the Raise Your Hand Texas loosely. We followed their outline. The biggest pieces that we, of course, came up with. I was on the committee, so there must be a calendar. And then we came up for our advocacy plan for the coming year. I will let Ms. Alcatab or Ms. Sells speak about our process and how we got there and all the other good things. Who wants to start? Not all at once. Ms. Alcatab, you want to start?
Okay, so first of all, thank you for the pleasure of serving on this committee, because you guys understand that advocacy is very important to me, and so it was really important for me to understand the work that goes behind creating an advocacy plan. And, as Ms. Prosnick said, we did really take what we worked on with Raise Your Hand Texas and really tried to keep true to everyone's input and keep that going and analyzing what do we need to do in the offset as we're preparing. And one of the big things that we took note of is we can't wait until we get into a legislative year to start making these decisions. We need to make sure that we're starting to be proactive and getting out into the community, getting out to our legislators, and making sure that everyone understands here's where we are coming from and here's our focus. And it all comes back to one big thing, and that goes back to student funding. That's what we need to focus on. Because if we don't have the student funding, then we don't have the other pieces that we are needing in order to make everything work for the students. And so we really took what you guys inputted and really flowed with that in inputting that school funding is our issue. And we created the plan based upon that. And one of the big pieces that we did appreciate was developing that calendar. Because the thing is if we're trying to make sure that we're staying on the plan of how it's going to go before the legislative year comes in, you need to have a plan. And by us putting that calendar into place, it lets everybody understand where we're going and where we need to be, and it holds us accountable. And it holds the legislators accountable, because we're also telling them, this is what I need from you at this time. This is what I need from you in quarter one. Here's what I need from you in quarter two. Because we're all going back to that same focus of school funding and making it clear that they understand, here's how we're doing it. Here's how LASD is going to come in and advocate for our students in our district. And so that was a big piece that we really put into it. And then, we really try to tie in, like, what is our one ask that we're asking for? The one ask that we're asking for is the basic allotment, right? The one action, we need our legislators to be partners with us in getting that basic allotment. That's it. If you can help us get that, we can achieve so much more. So we have one ask and one action. Short, simple, sweet. It's easy for people to understand, and we can start advocating earlier than waiting until the last minute and then trying to get everyone on board. Catherine, what did I miss?
I think you covered a lot. I think that it really goes back to that rich discussion we had as a board back at Serve Lewisville that day. And we really came to that conclusion that we've always looked at advocacy as, we've got to get something together the fall before they go into session. And we've realized that really that's too late. It's too late to get our community partners involved. It's too late to get our other partners involved. As far as our PTAs, we really needed to have this out there when PTAs come back into school in August, because once they know this, then they can advocate along with us. And so I think that it was through the discussion and us listening to you all that day, though, that once our committee came together, it was very clear that really all of the issues that we face, or the majority of the issues that we face, are really come down to funding. And it's something that the legislators are not doing according to the Texas state laws, to be honest. And so they're trying to spin it, and so we're going to have to combat that. But I really believe that the timeline and this calendar is going to be invaluable, not only to this board, but to subsequent boards. Because as you know, once we were all elected in May, you're still drinking out of a fire hose and you've done some advocacy, maybe in the PTO realm or something, but this is a different ball game. And so to have this in perpetuity, whether it's going to be a living document, we're going to figure out things that maybe aren't going to work on this timeline this next year or next 2 years. And we're very open to change, but we did look at others' timeline. We did think about what have we done. There was thought put into this, and we hope that this is something that's going to benefit not only us, but also those that we're asking to partner with us to take this message to Austin. And also, the one thing that we are going to do is expand it to a nationwide. And so if you'll see on that last page, this really is going to be the ask. And these are going to be your playing cards, for a better word, is when you're in Austin or you're talking to our local legislators, you're going to say one ask, one action. That's what we want. That's what we need. That's what our students deserve. And then at the national level, one ask, one action, fully fund IDEA for everyone. And so I think that I just want to give kudos, though, to our communications team for taking some napkin drawings, literally they were napkin drawings that I did in a coffee shop while we were on our call one day, and turning it into what we consider worthy to take with us. So I think that I'm in such a more comfortable place than I think I've ever been going into this next legislative session. So happy to answer any questions.
Happy to answer any question, and absolutely take your input. I know that you just saw this tonight for the first time, so please email any input or questions or edits that you want, because this isn't the committee's, this is the committee's draft, but this is our document. Yes, Ms. Taylor.
I just wanted to say this is great work. Thank you for putting it together, for taking information that we shared at that meeting and putting it into such a succinct document with timelines. And I really appreciate the calendar a lot because it tells you exactly what you should be doing. Because you're right, when you're a new board member, you know you've been doing some advocacy locally, but it's on a whole nother level. And sometimes you're wondering, am I making an impact? You know, sending an email here, having a discussion here. I like the fact that the plan is written down. I also love the collaboration and partnership aspect of it because, you know, you think about it, a lot of groups are advocating, you know, on their own, but are they making the impact that they should make? And you think about it with your hand, you know, one group on your hand, but if you put 5 together, you can make a fist and really make an impact. And so I love the collaboration with other organizations, with our people that we already use for brand ambassadors. I am really loving this and just ready to get going and get started. I also love that it wasn't a whole list of things. We have one ask. We need more money. And that's powerful. You don't even have to remember a bunch of stuff. Legislative priorities 1 through 10. You just have to remember sort of the elevator speech that you guys have given us. So I just want to say kudos, great work, excited to get started and make our partners work for us.
Dr. Barker.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you to the committee for putting this together. I mean, a lot of times people come up with a plan and it's the first part, right? It's the vague, here's what we believe, here's why we think this is important, but this takes it down into the nitty-gritty of what needs to get done. And I look forward to us coming back to this on a quarterly basis and saying, who's doing this? How do we break this down into more discrete steps, and who's taking what part, so that we don't just let this be a document that lives in a folder somewhere, but is something that we are engaging in on a regular basis. So thank you to the committee.
So this will come back to us for approval, so input is appreciated. I will tell you the final pretty document won't have some of the stuff in it. It'll have a little bit more about the basic allotment and how, with numbers and how it affects each of those things. That'll be the pretty document that we hand out to legislators and some of our advocacy teams. But the advocacy document will be ours. The calendar, it's the desire of the committee to add that to our BOP as part of the BOP. And, you know, we talk sometimes about board accountability, and I think that's where some of that, since we are, in my opinion, responsible for advocacy, that is a place, to your point, Dr. Barker, that we can come back and check in and make sure we're hitting them. And to Ms. Sell's point, also to note that this sounded like it would be great to do in October, and we've discovered that October is not the month to do it in. Perhaps we should be doing that earlier or later. That's all up for grabs. I once again want to really appreciate the work. This was not a one meeting and done. I think we met 5 times for at least an hour every time. So, what? And offline work, yes. Everyone had some good offline work. So I'm very excited to roll this out. I'm excited to have both a state and federal advocacy plan. We have not really had a federal advocacy plan before. And I think with certainly discovering that, you know, we spend $15 million more than we receive, I think that is a worthy note. So with that, next on our agenda, unless anybody has anything else, is the Legislative Advisory Council report from Ms. Sells.
Yes, Madam President, thank you so much. I just wanted to give out a quick quick report on the meeting that was held on April the 20th at TASB headquarters. There were almost 90 of us that were there from 20 different regions around the state. And there was a lot of discussion at the beginning. The TASB staff had, of course, through all the grassroots efforts, had identified 5 priorities statewide. And then everybody in the room seemed to have another priority they wanted to add on. And we got up going into 8 and 9 and 10, and it was brought to their attention that we've done this in the past and it really hasn't worked. To have multiple priorities that seem to confuse our legislators. It seems to confuse their aides. And it gives them more information than they really know how to internally decipher into what could work for school districts. And so at the end of the discussion that day, a vote was taken to either go along with what we've done in the past for 8 to 10 priorities, or to kind of follow the LISD way and narrow it down to 1 or 2 priorities. And I will say that I'm glad to say that was passed by supermajority in that room, which was quite a feat based on some of the dissension that was had there in the room about doing it the way we've done it before, and that seems to work. And I seem to disagree with some of their arguments. Of course, we will meet again the last Saturday of SLI in San Antonio, and I'll be there to represent this region once again. And we will formalize what we will be bringing to the delegation then in September for approval. And I will tell you that right now, as it looks, we will probably decide on the 2 priorities, and they will be in the general vicinity of funding and local control. And so, once again, we will also meet after the legislative session to evaluate, and I'll be happy to bring forth a report then to see if we've made any progress. But that was how the day went. It was a very good discussion. And I'm going to be interested to see exactly how it all plays out at the Saturday meeting there at SLI. So, thank you.
We greatly appreciate your voice in the room. I think simplicity, as we discovered for us, I think works best, and I look forward to having you in the room in San Antonio. So next is on the agenda is student leadership experience, and this falls under if you send a trustee to a session down to governance camp, they come back with an idea. So I am very excited that Dr. Miller and Dr. Rapp bought into this amazing idea, and I'm going to let her share it with you all.
All right, so we have our student leadership experience. We're igniting a legacy. And the experience is a 2-year experience for rising juniors. So they're current sophomores. They'll participate their junior and senior year for really developing their leadership potential and capacity, engaging with businesses, community partners, first to know themselves as a leader and develop those leadership skills, and then to go partner and see it in action, what that looks like in the community and businesses. And then in year 2, it's about partnering with them through nonprofits, community projects in order to use that leadership that they've been developing. So the goal is to engage and inspire student leaders with the skills and confidence to build a legacy through leadership and service to make a positive impact on communities in which they serve, ultimately on their campus, and then once they leave here, what does that impact look like wherever they go in their community? So we will be opening applications here in the next week or so so they'll apply now for starting their junior year. We'll have 5 representatives from each campus. 2-year commitment. They'll come 7 sessions a year, and it's a day during the school day. So they come here and we do projects and that kind of thing. So we'll work with counselors and principals on, anyone can apply, but then making sure, is this the right fit for them to grow in the capacity they're in now, and then partnering with our businesses and organizations. That's an overview.
So any questions? Absolutely.
What about transportations for these little darlings?
Yes, transportation will be provided if that is needed. It's not an obstacle. Yes.
So I saw this presentation from Fort Bend. Oh, I'm so sorry. Dr. Bonner.
Yeah, just real quickly, and thank you. What's the end goal? Do we expect these kiddos to fill in the blank?
Well, our target is really emergent leaders, and so those who might not otherwise have opportunities, and then exposing them to community things so really growing their capacity when they...
So experiential and then TBD based on their desires? Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Anybody else? So I saw this presentation from Fort Bend ISD, and to me it just really spoke to our statement of engaging and inspiring learners and leaders. It will be a board-led program in that we're not teaching every class, but would like a board member at each one of the sessions as a way of I don't know, sharing our leadership skills or learning something from them, probably more than likely. But I'm very excited that this is taking off as quickly as it has, and I give Dr. Miller a great deal of credit for that. And I think Savannah from Communications, who came up with our logo of a student reaching for one of our LISD stars. So thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to seeing the applications. And with that, if there is no further business, the time is 7:36 p.m. and this meeting is adjourned.